You might not have heard of this one. There is actually a Carbon X Prize challenge, and it pits companies against each other to see who can come up with the best technology to find a positive, valuable use for carbon dioxide. The idea is reducing emissions to help the climate should be good business. Now, over the coming weeks, we're going to talk to the Canadian companies that are finalists in this race. 3 Canadian companies have been named as finalists, and there's a $20 million prize at the end. Right, we're going to start with Pond Technologies. It's working on recycling carbon with algae. We are joined by Steve Martin, CEO and Chief Scientist at Pond Technologies. It's great to see you.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
And just to be brutally simplistic here, you're basically taking industrial gases, including CO2, and putting them through vast vats of algae and turning the gases into algae.
Pretty much that's what we're doing. It's sort of like the nasty stuff you find in your swimming pool. We're finding a good use for it.
So pond scum can be useful.
Pond scum is useful. It's basically the bottom of the food chain, and it consumes carbon dioxide with a light-triggered reaction to make the nasty stuff into something that's very useful for everybody.
And the idea, well, you've 2 kind of streams here. One is that this algae itself, once it takes in the gases, will become a fuel.
The algae can be used as a fuel. It mitigates the carbon emissions, but there's also a whole other use for algae and nutraceuticals and all sorts of essential components that are required for salmon fish farming, for agriculture, for soil amendment.
But I think I've been looking at your website. You say that the algae used for food, it wouldn't be made from waste gases.
No, it wouldn't be, but the technology, the platform technology that we've developed is identical, irrespective of which way you go.
So you've teamed up already with Canadian Natural on a pilot plant at their big Horizon oil sands facility, and also with St. Mary's Cement, because cement is a terrible emitter of carbon dioxide.
No, that's right. We also have a program that we've done with U.S. Steel Canada. And as a matter of fact, on November 3rd, we have a launch event for our project that we were doing earlier with the ACC, the Algae Carbon Conversion Program, that included St. Mary's Cement, Canadian Natural, and the National Research Council.
So this could be big because it would be point source pollution from power plants, big industrial emitters, and you'd be capturing it right there.
I think by definition it is big. We are sort of like the solution that appears to me possible. We're an end-of-pipe solution. We don't impact the host plant in any way, and we provide a method for Canada to meet its carbon emissions reductions under, for example, the Paris Accords.
Surely other people around the world are using algae, though, in this way.
There are people who are attempting it. We think we're the furthest ahead, and we're very proud of our performance in the Carbon X Prize, being one of those few selected to make it to the next round. It's a real validation of what we're doing. So I would say that there are a number of solutions. There's probably a very big ecosystem of people that can impact carbon emissions. We think we're at the lead of the algae.
And we should remind the viewers the Carbon X Prize, it's sponsored by NRG, which is a huge US utility, but then also the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance.
That's correct, yeah. So our partner in the Algae Carbon Conversion Program, Canadian Natural, is a member of COSIA, and we're looking to mitigate the emissions on the oil sands for the benefit of everyone.
And remind us what you're doing with the city of Markham. That's a community to the northeast of Toronto.
Yeah, well, Pond has, they're actually a member of our Carbon X Prize team.
Okay.
We're going to be working on a small combined heat and power plant. I guess it's not small, but basically they're going to be the emission source that we're going to be using for the Carbon X Prize to find a valuable output from carbon emissions and prove that you can basically make this into good economics.
So these vats of algae, they need to be pretty big, but humanity could build these things to capture significant carbon?
Well, it's not, big is sort of relative. They're not that big, as it turns out. If you're going to grow something to try and get rid of carbon emissions, the best thing you can grow is algae, because it probably grows 50 times faster than corn. So you get multiple generations of this product per day, and each one of those gets its carbon emissions from the smokestack. So it's a very positive way to use the emissions from the host plant and produce a product that has value to others.
But in terms of kingdoms of life, algae is neither a plant or an animal?
It's really complicated. It's better to ask a biologist. It's sort of a plant, sort of an animal. It will actually photosynthesize, which is what we're doing when we use to mitigate the carbon emissions, but it will also eat other organisms as well, or eat sugars. So they call it a so-called mixotropic organism. But it's sort of beneath plants and beside animals. Some of them swim around, some of them don't. We have a platform technology that doesn't really care which of the algae you put in there. Of all the millions of strain, it'll grow it all.
And there are millions of types of algae?
Probably more. There are libraries that we access have in the hundreds and some to the thousands, but there's an awful lot of strains of algae.
How did you get going with this technology?
Read an article in the Washington Post that said you can make biodiesel out of algae, and I thought that's a good idea. We should start a company, and we did, and that's basically where it started. My background is in light, and it seemed to me that the limiting technology of all of this is through the illumination technologies, and I have a strong background in that. We were able to find the appropriate partners through the Ontario government and other investors, and most recently some people who are interested in investment with conscious capital. There's a group we're working with called Crystal Wealth that have done a tremendous job for us recently, and the company's just grown from there.
Sorry, what's the connection with light here?
Well, it's a light-triggered reaction, so you need to have a way to deliver light to the algae in order to get it to grow very efficiently, to industrialize the process. Anybody, as I mentioned earlier, has a swimming pool can sort of prove to themselves that algae grows pretty well. The trick is often killing it. But industrializing that process, turning it into something that you can stick on the end of a smokestack, for example, or you can use to grow nutraceuticals, for another example, requires that you have sort of exquisite control of all of the variables. You need to control the temperature, the pH, and all the various growth conditions. Additionally, you need to control the light.
And we've heard that if we were to go to clean coal, and opponents of coal say that's a myth, that it would enormously reduce the efficiency of coal plants. Could you get round that way?
We did a calculations back of the envelope, and we looked at every plant in North America emitting more than 100,000 tons of CO2. If we were to apply our technology to all of those plants, we would reduce diesel consumption by 30% across North America. At the same time, we'd mitigate probably fully half of the carbon emissions from coal. So there's a real future to this technology properly deployed.
So never mind the hydrogen age, maybe we're going into the algae age.
Algae can be used to grow hydrogen. You can, there are algae that will emit hydrogen directly.
And they would take maybe industrial gases and produce hydrogen.
You can do that.
Okay, well, we found out more about hydrogen, and it's a fascinating story. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
More about algae, I should say. Yeah, that's right. My mind was racing ahead of itself there. Steve, thanks very much.